All right, so now let's look at some within activity visual schedules. So between activity is, math, then science, then recess, those kinds of schedules. Within activity visual schedules, show the steps for a particular activity. So one activity, break it down, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and I'm going to use my visuals to show all of those steps. So this is really helpful for increasing independence, really useful as a memory aid. One of the sort of emerging areas of research is becoming the use of visual supports like this for individuals who are elderly and experiencing dementia as a memory aid, right? So the kinds of things that we've been doing as visual supports for individuals with developmental disabilities may also be quite useful for individuals with dementia. We already know that they're oftentimes useful for individuals, say, with an acquired brain injury or something like that, right? But people are now starting to do that research with elderly folk, right? And how can we use these kinds of supports for them as well? Because they often have memory difficulties. It's not that they don't know what the skills are or how to do them, but they forget what they're supposed to do, right? So it can either be, let's get you more independent, or it could be, let's make sure that you remember all of the steps. Some of our individuals just forget the steps. So this is a support I actually made just recently for a young woman that I'm working with for showering. And so this gets Velcroed into her, onto her shower wall. Now I was really excited because you see how you can see through all these pictures? And these are little flaps and I've got white Velcro on them. I found clear Velcro on Amazon and I was so excited. I hadn't used it before, but I thought it must surely exist, and I found some. And then I was sad because you see, although it looks beautiful, the clear Velcro isn't very hook-like. And so after about 2 times opening and closing, it no longer stuck closed anymore. So we had to remake it. It's so pretty. I was so excited. But we had to remake it with just larger tabs and then some Velcro over here and some Velcro at the end of a longer tab so that she could close it. And the idea is that as she completes a step, she closes the tab, right? Because that's easier in the shower. We don't want pieces floating around and stuff. This is an easier way for her to go about doing all the tasks and remembering. So we've already taught her the skills. We taught her the skills in the bathtub. It's easier to teach bathing skills when a person's like sitting still, and as the support staff, you're not getting soaked in the shower or trying to right? But now that she knows the skills, she can go into the shower, but it's just a point of remembering and not having to have somebody sort of stand there and tell her what to do. She'll be able to do it independently, right? So that's an example. This is another example of a routine. There's a whole story that goes with this. So I had these twin deaf students, and Mom drove them home every day after school. And one day it so happened that when Mom went and she picked up one twin, Kelty, she was looking for the other twin, Haley, and Haley had disappeared. Everybody's scouring the school looking for Haley. Where has she gone? And now Kelty is mad because Kelty's, we're supposed to be in the car going home. I'm gonna watch a video. That's what happens after school. Why do we keep walking around the school? This is not good. I'm not happy about this. And they couldn't find Haley. And finally we found her tucked away in the back corner of my resource room where all the books were, because she loved to read. And so she was off reading books. So, well, that's lovely that you want to read books, but it's not okay at home time to sort of sneak off and hide away somewhere and read books when people are looking for you. And she was missing information. She didn't know that Mom was worried. She didn't know that everybody else in the school was worried. So I sat down and made a script with her. And I cut out all the pieces. I decided that I was actually gonna co-construct this script with her. I kind of knew what it was gonna look like, but I was gonna give her some options, and I wanted to build it with her so that she participated in it. So I had all of these little pieces essentially cut out of pieces of paper first, and we're sitting down at the table, her and I, and sequencing everything together and having a bit of a conversation about what happened. So we've got, it's home time, and you go to your locker and you get your coat and bag. And what do? You need to walk to Mom. Shows her walking. And this big red one here, it's a little hard to see, but it's no running. We figured we're talking about walking in the halls. It's not really related to this particular problem, but running in the halls is always an issue. So we'll just, oh, and by the way, remember, we don't run in the halls, that's a school rule. And then we essentially showed, here's what she thinks. Here's Haley walking, and she thinks play in Brenda's room, which is essentially what happened, right? She was dismissed from her classroom, and she got the bright idea that she should come hang out in my room, right? So you think play in Brenda's room, stop. If you think that, you need to stop. And you need to remember, no Brenda's room, you're going to mom, right? Walking to mom, mom, that's where you're going. Right? It's a bit of a cognitive behavior strategy. Haley got to choose where she could meet mom, so I had checked with mom, and there were a couple of places in the school that, we could meet here, we could meet there. So Haley chose the front door, and we got this part done. So this was during a resource period with Haley, and so we had gotten as far during a resource period as Haley choosing that she wanted to meet her mom at the front door. So we had not finished this yet. We hadn't practiced this yet, 'cause once we made it, and then we're gonna laminate it, and we're gonna practice it, and role play it. Well, on the day that Haley and I started working on this, and only got so far as her choosing, I want to meet mom at the front door, at 2:45, I'm walking through the school past the front door into the office, and who should be standing at the front door with her bag in her hand and her coat on? But Haley. Because, well, that's what it says, right? It was about giving her some information. We finished up, right? Because the thing is that it wasn't that they could never come to my room, but if you want to come to my room, you have to meet mom, and then you ask, can we go to Brenda's room? And then there are two possible answers. Sometimes the answer's yes, and everybody comes, right? And they had another little kid that they drove home to. Or mom will say, let's put that on the calendar. We were kind of working on the no word at the time. Both of the girls had difficulty with the no word. And so just seeing the fingers about to make the no word led to a problem. So it was always, hold on a sec, let's put that in the calendar. So mom just kept a little calendar in her purse, one of those little like Hallmark, kind of flip it open, paperback calendars, and then they'd write it on a day, like later that week. And Haley understood calendars, that was fine. Once it was in the calendar, she knew, right, it'll happen. And then everybody walked to the van, and everybody was happy. Here are all of the people in her life that are happy because she followed the plan. And Haley actually was very upset if people were not pleased with her, if people were unhappy about her. She found that quite distressing. So she was very much motivated by people being happy with her. And so, I mean, the first day before we even finished, she was waiting for her mom at the front door, which was lovely. But we did finish the script, we laminated it, we made a whole bunch of them. She had them plastered on the wall at home. They were plastered on the wall in her classroom and in my resource room. She had a smaller one in her locker on the locker door. Her mom had one in the car, so in the morning she saw it in the car, like, go big or go home. We're just like inundating her. And when her teacher dismissed her at the end of the day and gave her her communication book, always on the front of her communication book was clipped a copy of this. Remember, right? Well, within about 2 months, there were no issues, and we just started to fade the visuals away, right? Because this had become habit at that point. Never an issue again, right? But in this case, it's here are the steps for what you do after school. This is how it goes. And then we also taught her a little bit of, when you have these ideas that seem like a really great idea, hold up, right? Remember what you're supposed to do instead, right? So we use this kind of thing with her a lot, right? I use a lot of thought bubbles with kids, right? What are you thinking? Here's what you need to be doing instead. This is another example of one that I did for a few of my kids. There's that transition from kind of the primary grades into the intermediate grades where you get homework. There's usually that 1 year that's the first homework year. And this was for one of my kids during the first homework year. It was grade 4, had not been getting homework. The routine had always been, up until grade 4, that I go to school, I go home, and I immediately go from the front door to the VCR. It was still in the days of VCRs. Those of you who are too young to remember VCRs, right? It's like a DVD player, which some, right, DVD players won't be around much longer either. run in, put a video in and watch a video. Well, now grade 4, there was homework and mom wanted homework done first. And it was not a happy time when they would arrive home and mom's like, no, we're doing homework. So we made this script and we got a plastic folder, you know, the little plastic envelopes that you can get at the office store. We attached this to the inside, we laminated it, everything gets laminated, and then taped it to the inside of that folder, and this was the homework folder. And so when the teacher assigned homework at the end of the day, the homework went in the folder, and the teacher gave the student the folder, and the teacher reviewed how things were gonna go down, right? You're going home, you're doing your homework, no TV. When you're finished the homework, put it in the envelope, then put the envelope in your bag. We might as well start that habit now too, right? And then TV, or you know, you could even play. You don't have to watch TV, right? And part of the reason why we had the teacher give it was so that the students started to learn that it's not just mom or dad always kind of being the heavy, that the teacher says, this is what's gonna happen. So it was kind of like coming from both ends and wasn't just about mom, it was usually about mom having to say, no, 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 you have to do your homework. And this way it was also coming from the teacher, right? So that was a nice way of being able to convey that information. And the kids often would be in the car holding the folder, right? So it's like the whole drive home too, there's the information. Oh yeah, right, here's how this is gonna be. So, you know, then it was a 20-minute drive. Today, probably it would be 40, 50, 60, traffic, you know. Lots of time to sit and understand what's gonna happen. Here's another example. This one I put together for a client that I'd been working with who engaged in really quite severe food refusal behavior. And so we'd done a whole intervention at home over a good year, teaching this individual to accept foods because he ate pretty much next to nothing. Once we got him eating, he was eating all kinds of food at home, that was great, but then he was going into kindergarten and there was a little bit of concern that he goes into kindergarten and they're gonna have, you know, snack time at kindergarten, and if people don't know how to support him in his eating, we could end up losing a lot of the progress that we had made, because essentially he learned that if somebody asked him to eat and he squawked a little bit, they'd not ask him to eat anymore, and it turned into a huge problem, right? So we didn't want the situation to happen where perhaps an aide at school who hadn't been trained yet or wasn't aware of what the plan was ended up kind of saying, oh, okay, well that's all right, you don't have to have your snack, because all it would take is a couple of times of that and things would start to unravel. So we made this schedule to go on this child's lunch bag. This is this actual child's lunch bag, his snack bag, because it was kindergarten. And the way that I set it up, kind of hard for you to tell, but behind each of these individual symbols, there's a white board with 8 squares, and on those squares are the exact same symbols. So for the adult staff getting the visuals set up before snack time, the staff just has to match the symbols to make sure that they're all in the correct order. Like, I wanted to make it foolproof, right? Because a lot of times, right, we've got an SEA sub and it's kindergarten and things are crazy anyway, so let's make it super easy. So the routine was eat and drink. When it's all gone, wipe your face. That was one of the goals we were working on for this kid, was wiping his face afterwards, wiping his hands afterwards, putting his dishes in the lunchbox. There's a little photo of his lunchbox on this symbol, throwing his garbage away, putting his lunchbox in the cubby, and because eating foods that he wasn't really fond of was still a new thing, he got a few pieces of candy as reinforcement for eating, you know, his vegetables and stuff like that. And so the aide had the candy to give, right? But all of this was inside the lunchbox in a Ziploc bag. And mom always made sure when she sent snack in the morning that the symbols were there, and we had multiples of everything because, you know, things get lost. And then there were little written instructions, so whoever showed up and happened to be helping, if they weren't trained, it was pretty foolproof. Put the symbols on the board, match them, put the board on the outside, and the kid will do the rest. He knows what to do. He knows the routine, just like let him eat. And it worked beautifully, right? This kid went to kindergarten, he ate at snack time, we didn't have any issues, it was all good, right? So Those kinds of things, kind of helping to transfer a routine from one environment to another environment and helping with that generalization, right? For a lot of our individuals, generalization is challenging. So we can use these kinds of within activity schedules to help generalize a skill from one environment, like home, to another environment like school. And the thing that's constant is the visual schedule. Right? So kids learn, well, so long as this is the visual schedule, I just do what's on the schedule. Doesn't matter if I'm at home or at school or a vocational setting or whatever. If it's on the schedule, I do it. So that can really promote generalization for a lot of people. Just a couple more that I'll show you. This is one I made for a kid dressing at the pool. So he would go with a support worker. And what he tended to do is that while the support worker was in a cubicle getting dressed, he'd run around the change room. Sometimes clothed, sometimes not, hey, I have no adult supervision and it's a big change room and there's like a big mirror and there's like fun stuff and I think there was the little pen for babies. Let me jump in and out of that a few times. That's right, good times. And so we put this together, put some magnet on the back of it so that it would magnet on the little magnetic door, right, the metal door of his cubicle. And again, this is a kid where once we showed him what the expectations were, he did it, and it was kind of like, well, if you told me what you wanted, but you left it open. So if you're gonna leave it open, I'll do whatever I want, right? But, oh, okay, this is what you want, fine, I'll do that. And we kind of taught too a couple important things. Pack your stuff up, because if he did get his clothes on, then usually there was like the wetsuit on the floor and the towels somewhere else, and his bag is ripped apart in a different area. No, pack up your stuff, it's your stuff, you're responsible. And then if he was ready before his support worker was ready, he needed to sit and wait. Running around the change room was not an acceptable thing to do. And once we had a visual that showed him what the expectations were, okay. Right? And the reason that he did that without really much instruction was because we'd already taught him a bunch of other things with other similar scripts. So the first few times that you have a schedule like this, you're probably gonna need to do a lot of teaching. I'm gonna physically support you through this. I'm gonna make sure that you do what you need to do. I'm gonna deliver what kinds of prompts I need to deliver. And then I'm gonna back off and fade away my help. Eventually, after a few different routines, after a few different schedules, individuals learn, I see a schedule, I do what's on the schedule, and then we need to provide less direct support when we introduce a new schedule. So long as they have the skill set, he knew how to dress, right? He had the skill set. It was just about giving him the information. So it wasn't like in this case, the support worker had to stand there and go, okay, dry your face, that means pick up the towel and do this. He already knew that. Right? So you get the difference. If it were things that he did not know how to do, we'd have to teach it and teach him to refer to the schedule. But if he already knows how to follow a schedule because he's been following schedules for a while, and he knows how to do all of the skills on the schedule, we can probably just give him the schedule, point to it, get him going, and then leave him to do it. Okay? Making a sandwich, this is another example, right? This is an example with pictures. What do you need? What are the steps, right? If you're a finicky person like me, here you've had the knife in the peanut butter, you have to wipe it before you stick it into the jam, right? For some of us, those are important things. Yes, good, see, I'm not the only one. Very good. This is another one for using the bus, right? What are you supposed to do when you use the bus, right? Being quiet being an important part of this. This was one that I had in a little sort of waist binder that a kid would wear. And again, on the bus, it's like, well, what are the expectations? What are the expectations? And then there's this one. This is one of my favorite ones. When I was a grad student, when I was doing my PhD, do any of you know Dr. Joe Lucician from UBC? If you don't know him, you should know him because he's lovely. But he was doing a big study working on positive behavior support strategies with families of very challenging kids. And I was one of his research assistants. So I was assigned some families and I went into their homes and I did behavioral assessments and then made up plans. And I remember one of the first plans that I wrote for a family, for a routine, and it was very, shall we say, comprehensive. And I remember sitting in his room, and it was probably for this kid, and it was probably this routine, because you see that this looks very comprehensive. And I sat down in Joe's chair and I showed him the plan, and he's going through it, and he looked at me with this smile, and if you know Joe, you know Joe. He's just lovely. And he smiled at me and he said, "Brenda, you write the Cadillac of PBS plans." Now, what he meant by that was too many strategies. You went overboard, but it was his very kind way of saying that I went overboard, because I do have a tendency to do that. But I put this together as a schedule for a kid. So this was a young man that I was supporting in a morning routine. He was capable of getting up, getting dressed, brushing his teeth. But, you know, if mom will kind of drag me through it, why should I? Essentially, right? I'm not really a morning person. I don't particularly enjoy mornings. And if I lay here and she'll dress me eventually, I'm okay with that. And if I kind of like stand here at the sink all sort of wet noodle-like, and then she brushes my teeth for me, I'm all right with that. I'll do that, right? So that's kind of how he was when I found them. And so we were putting a routine together, and one of the things was to have a visual schedule. And I knew that he was gonna be challenging, not in terms of a skill thing, but challenging in terms of getting this kid to buy in and do, right? Because he kind of had it pretty sweet. He had a pretty good, like he just kind of like laid like this all morning, and mom did everything for him. So he was into transportation. He loved all things transportation. So I made this visual schedule, this big poster for his room that you see looks like the sky, it's got road, it's got train track, you see that there's Velcro in the sky. Well, every morning before he started his routine, his mom would give him a choice of vehicle to move through his schedule. So these are all of the things that he needs to do. And instead of turning over pictures of things he completed, he would get to move his vehicle from one task to the next. Right, I know. I was very thrilled with this. This took me a lot of time. But you know, the satisfaction. And he quite enjoyed it, right? And he got to choose, here's the reinforcer on the end, right? So he got to choose a reinforcer. And you know, within a few weeks, he was no longer the wet noodle. He was doing what he was supposed to do. And this is actually a really, really bright kid. Eventually, his morning routine was a written schedule that he checked off with a point system. And again, being an individual who loves trains, he wanted a model train, and it was expensive. And so we kind of worked out, you know, he's probably gonna have to work for about a year to earn the money for this very expensive model train. So we figured out about how many points does he earn every day if he mostly does everything right, how many days worth of points would he need that would take about a year. We kind of did all the math and worked it out, and so he saved points for a year. He had a menu. Sometimes he could spend, if he wanted to spend 2 or 3 points. One of his other favorites was those little Costco cream puffs. Mom kept some of those in the freezer, right? And so every so often, he'd check his stuff off, he'd add up his points, he had a little balance book that he'd put it in, and then he'd go, I think I want a cream puff today, right? And so he'd deduct his 5 points from his balance and he'd buy himself a cream puff. But at the end of the day, he saved up over a year, he got his model train set, right? But this is where it started, right? It started with him moving a little train picture along his way. So anyway, this took a long time, but I really liked it. I really thrilled with it. All right, so again, in terms of within activity schedules, you can do these on tablets as well. The other kinds of apps that I already talked about are good for that. Pickello is another app. I'm gonna talk about Pickello. I'm gonna reference Pickello a whole lot in terms of apps that you can use, because I like it for a whole bunch of things, but essentially with Pickello, you can kind of make like storybooks. So you could do a storybook for how to brush your teeth, or a storybook for how to make a sandwich, or a storybook for whatever. But all of those other visual scheduling apps that I already talked about, most of them have this setup in them where you've got your morning schedule, let's say. Get up, get dressed. And when you touch the get dressed button, it pops up a within activity schedule that says underwear, t-shirt, pants, socks, And then you go back to brush teeth, and you touch brush teeth, and it says toothpaste on toothbrush, all broken down, so you can actually embed these kinds of mini schedules, if you will, and link them to the big activity. So I can link the mini schedule for brushing teeth to the symbol for brush teeth, so when brush teeth comes up in the schedule, you get the mini schedule for how to brush your teeth, right? So a lot of those scheduling apps will allow you to do that, okay? In terms of Pickello, it essentially kind of just looks like this. These are 3 screenshots from Pickello of them making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you just sequence through page 1, page 2, page 3, and with Pickello, you can record or it can read the text, so you can get auditory information as well. So if you've got a non-reader, if you've got someone who does understand a bit of language, or you want to expose them to the language anyway, you can get both, right? So they can see it, they can read it, they can hear it. Yeah, so Pickello is really quite nice. I like Pickello a lot.